Lima Barreto was one of Brazil's most remarkable writers, known for his fierce critique of social injustices and the hypocrisy of the elites. Born in 1881 in Rio de Janeiro, to an Afro-Brazilian family, Barreto experienced the difficulties of social mobility and racial prejudice, which deeply influenced his works. In Clara dos Anjos, published posthumously in 1948, Barreto tells the story of a young mulatto woman who faces discrimination and the harsh realities of a racist and patriarchal society in early 20th century Brazil. The novel is set in the suburbs of Rio de Janeiro, a typical working-class area of the time. Clara dos Anjos, the protagonist, is a simple and naive young woman, the daughter of Joaquim dos Anjos, an honest mailman, and Dona Ingracia. Living in a society that marginalizes her because of her race and social status, Clara falls victim to racial and social prejudice. She falls in love with Cassie Jones, a charming yet manipulative young man from a higher social class. However, Cassie has no serious intentions, and Clara ends up heartbroken and deceived, suffering the consequences of her naivete and the cruelty of the world around her. Clara dos Anjos deals with central themes such as racism, sexism, and the exploitation of poor, black women in Brazil. Clara, a young dreamer, believes in Cassie's false promises of love, only to be cruelly abandoned. Lima Barreto realistically portrays racial and social inequality, showing how black women are doubly oppressed, both for their race and gender. The plot highlights the lack of social mobility for the lower classes and the brutality of a society that values appearances and disregards the marginalized. The novel adopts a deeply critical tone towards the social structure of the time. Barreto denounces the injustices faced by black women, who are constantly victimized by a patriarchal and racist society. The author uses accessible and direct language to reach a broader audience while prompting deep reflection on the living conditions of the poor and oppressed. Clara represents the fragility and vulnerability of black women in a hostile environment. To conclude, these are the 5 main characteristics of Clara dos Anjos by Lima Barreto. Critique of racism and sexism. The central theme of the novel is the denunciation of racism and sexism that dominate Clara's life. The story exposes the harsh realities faced by black women in a society that marginalizes them due to their race and gender. Marginalized characters. Clara and her family represent the working class and the outcasts of Brazilian society. Barreto gives voice to the marginalized, showing the tough realities of life in the suburbs of Rio de Janeiro. Depiction of suburban life in Rio de Janeiro. The suburban setting is portrayed in detail, showcasing the simple life and struggles of working-class people. This backdrop offers a critical view of the living conditions of the poorest layers of society. Fragile and naive female protagonist, Clara is a character marked by her innocence and vulnerability. Her story is a personal tragedy that reflects the fate of many poor, black women of the time, exploited by unscrupulous men and an oppressive society. Realistic and accessible style. Barreto uses simple and direct language, without complex literary devices, making his work accessible to readers of various educational levels. At the same time, his social criticism is sharp, highlighting Brazil's structural problems. This was our summary of the book Clara dos Anjos by Lima Barreto. We hope it was helpful.